In 1948, an automotive visionary unveiled what many considered to be the most revolutionary automobile America had ever seen. This wasn't just another car rolling off a production line. This was the Tucker 48, and it represented everything the established automotive industry feared: innovation, safety, and a genuine threat to their monopoly. But what happened next would become one of the most controversial chapters in American industrial history. A story of ambition crushed under the weight of corporate power and government persecution. Preston Thomas Tucker was born on September 21, 1903, in the small town of Capick, Michigan. From his earliest years, he was absolutely obsessed with automobiles. By the time he reached 16 years of age, young Preston had already left school and was making money buying and flipping cars, demonstrating an entrepreneurial spirit that would define his entire life. He took a job as a clerk at Cadillac, not for the modest paycheck, but to be close to the machines he loved. This wasn't just a job for Tucker. This was his education, his passion, his entire world. Now, here's where Tucker's story gets interesting. He later joined the Lincoln Park, Michigan Police Department, but he didn't join because he wanted to fight crime or serve his community. No. Preston Tucker joined the police force for one simple reason. He wanted to drive police vehicles. And if that wasn't bold enough, he was eventually banned from driving those very vehicles after he took a blowtorch to the dashboard of one police car, cutting a hole to allow heat from the engine to warm the cabin. You can already see the innovative, somewhat reckless spirit that would later define his approach to automobile manufacturing. Throughout the 1930s, Tucker worked on a Ford Motor Company assembly line while simultaneously running a gas station, where he began selling Studebaker automobiles as a side business. He was soon hired as a full-time automobile salesman and sold numerous makes, including Stutz, Chrysler, Pierce Arrow, and Dodge. But selling other people's cars was never going to be enough for Preston Tucker. He had bigger dreams that would eventually bring him into direct conflict with the most powerful corporations in America. During the early 1930s, Tucker developed an intense interest in motorsports. Every year, he would make an annual one-month trek to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, not just as a spectator, but as a student of automotive engineering and design. It was here, at this legendary racing venue, that Tucker met Harry Miller, the maker of more Indianapolis 500 winning engines than any other designer during that period. This meeting would prove to be pivotal. A better engineer than businessman, Miller declared bankruptcy in 1933 and was desperately looking for new opportunities. Tucker, recognizing genius when he saw it, persuaded Miller to join him in building race cars. Together they formed Miller and Tucker Incorporated in 1935. The company's first significant job was building 10 souped-up Ford V8 racers for none other than Henry Ford himself. Think about that for a moment. Preston Tucker was building high-performance vehicles for the very man who had revolutionized the automobile industry. Tucker was learning from the best, absorbing knowledge, making connections, and preparing for something much bigger than race cars. But it wasn't until 1944, almost a full year before World War II had ended, that Tucker started working on his most ambitious project. He hired the renowned car designer George S. Lawson to transform his vision into reality. Tucker's specifications were extraordinary, almost unheard of for that era. He wanted a water-cooled aluminum block, flat-six rear engine, disc brakes, four-wheel independent suspension, fuel injection, seat belts, and a padded dashboard. These weren't minor improvements. These were revolutionary concepts that would fundamentally change automotive safety and performance. Tucker wanted his car to be, above all else, safe. He included a reinforced safety cell passenger compartment, a pop-out windshield that would eject completely in an accident rather than shattering and injuring passengers, and something he called the crash chamber. This was a padded area ahead of the passenger seat, free from obstructions, providing front seat passengers a space to protect themselves in the event of an accident. The steering box was positioned behind the front axle to protect the driver in a front-end collision. Every single design element was carefully considered with human safety as the primary concern. After Lawson left the project in December of 1946 following creative disagreements, Tucker hired the talented stylist Alex Tremulous to design the body of the 48. And on June 19, 1947, the first prototype was unveiled to the public at the Tucker Corporation's factory in Chicago. The response was absolutely phenomenal. Here was an automobile that looked like it came from the future. The most recognizable feature was undoubtedly the third directional headlight, known as the Cyclops eye. Centrally located between the two standard headlights, this innovative light would activate at steering angles greater than 10 degrees to illuminate the car's path around corners. While headlamps that turned with the front wheels had been available since the 1920s, they would have been a first for a modern American production car. The Tucker 48 had a rear-engine, rear-wheel drive configuration. This wasn't entirely unprecedented, as Tatras and Volkswagens had employed similar layouts. But again, this would have been revolutionary for an American automobile. A perimeter frame surrounded the entire vehicle for crash protection, and a roll bar was integrated into the roof structure. The instrument panel and all controls were positioned within easy reach of the steering wheel, and that dashboard was padded for safety, something virtually unheard of in 1948. Now, here's something truly remarkable about the Tucker's engineering. The engine and transmission were mounted on a separate subframe which was secured with only 6 bolts. This meant the entire drivetrain could be lowered and removed from the car in a matter of minutes. Tucker envisioned a system where loaner engines could be quickly swapped in for service in just 30 minutes. Imagine that. In an era when major automotive service could take days or even weeks, Tucker was proposing a 30-minute engine replacement system. The specifications of the Tucker 48 were genuinely impressive. The rear-mounted air-cooled flat-six engine displaced 335 cubic inches, or 5.48 liters, and produced 166 horsepower at 3,200 revolutions per minute. The torque output was 372 pound-feet at 2,000 revolutions per minute. Top speed was rated at 120 miles per hour, extraordinary for that period. The car weighed approximately 4,200 pounds and used a Tucker Y1 4-speed pre-selector transmission. Initial public reception was overwhelmingly positive. Tucker had successfully created genuine excitement about his automobile. People wanted this car. Dealers wanted to sell this car. Investors wanted to be part of this revolutionary venture. And that's precisely when everything started to go terribly wrong. You see, the big 3 Detroit automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, had enjoyed essentially unchallenged dominance of the American automobile market for decades. These weren't just companies. These were industrial empires with vast resources, political connections that reached into the highest levels of government, and absolutely no tolerance for genuine competition. When Tucker's car began generating serious public interest, when dealers started placing orders, when it became clear this wasn't just some amateur's pipe dream but a legitimate threat, the machine began to move against him. Now, some historians argue that the Big Three didn't actively conspire against Tucker, that his company simply failed due to inexperience and financial mismanagement. And certainly Tucker Corporation faced genuine challenges. Development was slow and expensive. Rather than purchasing engines from an established supplier, Tucker bought an entire engine company for $1.8 million. Tooling and development costs brought each engine to approximately $1,500, which was roughly what Tucker had initially budgeted to build the entire car. These were serious problems, no question about it. But here's where the story becomes deeply troubling. On May 28, 1948, the Securities and Exchange Commission conducted a raid on the Tucker facility. Let me repeat that date for emphasis. May 28, 1948. This raid forced the company to immediately halt production and lay off 1,600 workers. 1,600 people lost their jobs in a single day. The plant that had been humming with activity, that had been on the verge of genuine mass production, was suddenly silent. Tucker had complained to authorities about what he believed were anti-competitive practices by his established competitors. He had filed formal complaints alleging that the Big Three were using their influence to prevent suppliers from selling components to Tucker Corporation. Instead of investigating Tucker's complaints about potential restraint of trade, the SEC turned its investigative powers directly against Tucker himself. Think about the implications of that for a moment. A small company complains about being crushed by industrial giants, and the government's response is to investigate not the giants, but the complainer. The SEC's initial focus was on Tucker's sale of dealerships and franchises. Tucker argued, quite reasonably, that while his business needed permission from the SEC to sell stock or securities, a business does not need permission to sell dealerships or franchises. The SEC disagreed and required the Tucker Corporation to amend all dealer contracts to state that there was significant risk of failure. Can you imagine the impact of that requirement on dealer confidence and public perception? But the SEC didn't stop there. On October 5, 1949, federal prosecutors brought Preston Tucker and 7 of his executives to trial on charges of conspiracy and fraud. The indictment included 31 separate counts, 25 counts of mail fraud, 5 counts of violating SEC regulations, and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud investors. The government's theory was devastating to Tucker's reputation. Prosecutors alleged that the company had no genuine plans to manufacture a new automobile, that the Tucker 48 was merely a facade, an elaborate scheme to mislead investors and steal their money. The trial began on October 4, 1949, in federal court in Chicago. The enterprise Tucker had established just 2 years prior was in complete disarray. The factory was shut down, the workforce had been dismissed, and media headlines across the country were branding Tucker's innovative vehicle as an outright scam. The prosecution attempted to demonstrate that Tucker had no real intention of producing a vehicle, that the Tucker Car Corporation existed solely to deceive investors and enrich its founders. But Tucker's defense team mounted a vigorous counterargument. They contended that the vehicle was indeed ready for mass production, pointing out that establishing a manufacturing plant and hiring thousands of employees would not have occurred if the endeavor had merely been fraudulent. Why would a con man spend millions on tooling, development, and factory equipment if his only goal was to steal investor money? It made no logical sense. And then something remarkable happened during the trial. A Tucker dealer, while testifying for the prosecution, inadvertently bolstered Tucker's case by declaring that the Tucker sedan was the finest car he had ever driven. The prosecution had called this witness to demonstrate fraud, and instead, the witness provided a glowing endorsement of the product. Additionally, Tucker's attorneys showcased 8 Tucker 48s parked directly in front of the courthouse, inviting jurors to personally experience rides in these supposedly non-existent vehicles. Tucker's lead attorney delivered a powerful closing argument. He told the jury that his clients had acted in good faith to create the vehicle exactly as promoted, and that they had come within a hair's breadth of success. That success would likely have been achieved, the attorney argued, if not for the harassment from the Securities and Exchange Commission itself. Lee Trees, the production manager for Tucker, testified that manufacturing dies were 100% complete by June of 1948, and that the following month, the SEC forced production to halt at the former Dodge Chicago facility. Multiple witnesses, including Trees, testified that the notion of fraud had never crossed their minds while working with Tucker and his team. These weren't gullible amateurs. These were experienced automotive professionals who had left established positions to join Tucker Corporation because they believed in the vision, the car, and the man. After 28 hours of deliberations on January 22, 1950, the jury returned with their verdict: not guilty, on all counts, for all accused. Preston Tucker and his 7 co-defendants were completely exonerated. Tucker, ever the optimist, famously remarked to the press, "Even Henry Ford failed the first time out." But here's the tragedy of this story. Although Tucker had prevailed at trial, although a jury of his peers had found him innocent of all charges, the Tucker Corporation was finished. The company was now without a factory, buried in overwhelming debt, and faced with numerous lawsuits from Tucker dealers who were understandably angry about the production delays and the company's collapse. The negative publicity from the trial, despite the acquittal, had irreparably damaged the Tucker brand. Investors had lost confidence, dealers had lost confidence, the dream was dead. In the end, only 51 Tucker 48s were ever produced. 51 automobiles that represented the future of automotive safety and innovation. Today, fewer than 50 complete Tuckers are known to exist, and most reside in private collections, valued at millions of dollars each. These cars are treated as priceless automotive artifacts, testaments to what might have been. Preston Tucker never gave up dreaming. He attempted to create another sports car with Brazilian investors, but sadly, Tucker succumbed to cancer on December 26, 1956. He was only 53 years old. One wonders what other innovations, what other revolutionary vehicles might have emerged from his creative mind if he had been given the chance to continue his work. So, what really happened to Preston Tucker and the Tucker Corporation? Did the Big Three actively conspire to destroy him, using their political connections to weaponize the SEC against a potential competitor? Or did Tucker's company simply fail due to the enormous challenges of starting a completely new automobile manufacturing operation in the shadow of established giants? The truth, as is often the case, probably lies somewhere in between. What we know for certain is this: Tucker created a genuinely revolutionary automobile. The safety features he pioneered, features that the established automakers had ignored or dismissed, would eventually become standard in virtually every car manufactured today. Seatbelts, padded dashboards, safety glass, crumple zones. These weren't priorities for General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler in 1948. But they were priorities for Preston Tucker. We also know that the SEC raid on May 28, 1948, effectively ended Tucker's chance of success. Whether that raid was motivated by legitimate regulatory concerns or by pressure from established automotive interests, the result was the same. A promising company was crippled at precisely the moment it was approaching viable production. Many contemporary observers believe, with considerable justification, that the major automotive manufacturers were indeed deeply concerned about competition from Tucker. They had seen his car. They had seen the public's enthusiastic response. They understood that if Tucker succeeded, if his safety-focused, innovative automobile gained market acceptance, it would force them to make expensive changes to their own products. It would disrupt their comfortable oligopoly. And that was something the Big Three absolutely could not allow. The Tucker 48 stands today as a symbol of American innovation crushed under the weight of corporate power and bureaucratic prosecution. Whether you believe Tucker was a martyred genius or simply an ambitious entrepreneur who bit off more than he could chew, one thing remains undeniable. His car was extraordinary, his vision was ahead of its time, and his prosecution, even though it ended in acquittal, effectively destroyed everything he had worked to build. The next time you buckle your seatbelt, or benefit from a padded dashboard, or appreciate any of the countless safety features we take for granted in modern automobiles, remember Preston Tucker. Remember the man who fought the establishment, who dared to challenge Detroit's giants, and who paid the ultimate price for his audacity. The Tucker 48 may have failed commercially, but its legacy lives on in every safe car on the road today. And perhaps that's the greatest triumph of all.